Are you going to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high-quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 56. Our next guest has to be one of the happiest guests I've ever heard when I first get on the mic with him. I'm really looking forward to our interview. Dr. Glenn Livingston is a Ph.D. psychologist, licensed in New York State, and he has one of the most unique backgrounds and stories to share. So I'm just going to get right to it. Glenn, I'd love for you to share with our listeners what you do and why you do it.
First of all, I'm happy because I get the opportunity to talk to you and to your audience and to help people to stop binge eating. I have a personal and very painful history with binge eating, which really was not addressed by the standards of care in my practice. And so by the way, I asked my radio show and podcast hosts to call me Glenn and let everybody know that I'm offering this as a coach and for education rather than necessarily as a doctor, because some of the things that you will hear are not necessarily in concert with what my board would recommend. So just with that disclaimer, I think that also gives us a lot of freedom. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to help some people to stop binge eating in a much simpler way than you might have been led to believe is possible.
Well, first of all, I have to point out that you aren't going to stick with the status quo. You're not going to go, oh, well, this is what the mainstream medical wants me to do, so I'm going to, stick with that. You're seeing what isn't working in the mainstream medical system. And you have found through your research and you're working with people and helping yourself as well, you found what works. And so it's okay. You see that some of what works isn't what mainstream medical wants you to do. And so you are willing to go outside that box because what you're doing works. So I just have to applaud you because my listeners love hearing doctors who are not just blindly going with the flow, that they're actually advocates for helping people get healthy no matter what, even if it's in the face of going against what the mainstream says to do.
I mean, the science on binge eating is we don't entirely know what causes it. I've got some very significant ideas about what causes it, but we don't really entirely know. The efficacy of the treatments are not great. They're helpful, and I wouldn't dissuade people from going a lot of the traditional routes. But this is a very practical way of approaching it that works for a lot of people, especially when nothing else has. Mm. And I was one of those people, and I suffered a lot because I didn't know about this, and that's why I'm doing it. So I could tell you more about my story. I could.
I'd love to hear. Let's hear a bit more about you, and then we can get into your book that you're giving away. A book to our listeners. By the way, Glenn's website is neverbingeagain.com. But yeah, let's get into your story, and then we'll get into how you help people and what's working that you're seeing is working.
Okay, so I'm a psychologist, Ashley, from a family of 17 psychologists. Actually, now I think it's 20. So it's definitely the family business, and my mom and my dad and my aunts and my uncles and my cousins and my grandparents, and it's not really a family reunion that you want to be at.
I was just thinking Thanksgiving must be amazing.
And you know what? Nobody agrees. Nobody agrees on anything. Everybody's got another way that they think everything should be approached. But you don't necessarily want to be there, or maybe you do. But the reason that I say that is because from my perspective growing up everything was psychological. And so when I was younger, I had what you would today call exercise bulimia, which means that I couldn't stick my finger down my throat, but I really, really liked to eat. And I discovered that, as a 6'4" guy, if I worked out a lot, I could eat 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, and it would just kind of go through me. And until I was about 18, 20, 21, that kind of worked for me because I didn't have that many responsibilities, and I had a youthful metabolism, and I had a lot of time to work out. But I would eat massive, massive volumes of just about anything that wasn't nailed down. And it consumed a lot of time and energy and a lot of my thought process. And then what I found when I got to graduate school and they started to have us see patients, and I was taking on, and I got married and I was taking on all of these responsibilities, was that, first of all, I didn't have the time to exercise it all off anymore. And secondly, the obsession was preventing me from being present in all of these responsible positions that I really, with my heart and soul, wanted to take on. I wanted to be a couples and family therapist, and that's actually what I became for quite a long time. And I would be sitting with patients who were pouring out their heart and soul often after an affair or some really traumatic event. And it was hard for me to concentrate because I was thinking about when is the next time that I can get over to the deli and dislodge my jaw and have them empty out the counter into it. And I'm exaggerating, but not horrifically. And anybody who's really experienced binge eating, not just but the techniques I'll be talking about work for general overeating also, but anybody who's really experienced binge eating knows that it's a discrete experience where you almost feel like there's a gun to your head forcing you to eat as much as humanly possible. And it really takes away most of the pleasure in life for the significant periods that you go through it with. And so I tried to get help psychologically. I knew some of the best doctors in New York because of how I'd been raised. And, my dad taught at postgraduate center and published all kinds of books on psychology. So I knew a lot of really good people. And I learned a lot about myself in the process of looking for help. I dug deep and got soulful insights into, well, for example, chocolate was really one of my primary binge foods and the thing that called to me the most. And I kind of eventually figured out that my mom was an army wife and she was very worried about my dad in Vietnam. And so it was easier for her to, put a bottle of Bosco in a refrigerator on the floor and train me to go get that chocolate and make chocolate milk or something rather than, she couldn't be 100% present all the time. And then they were both very busy economically trying to take care of things. And so I kind of started to understand that, well, I didn't really want chocolate. I wanted my mom, and I wanted love.
Wow.
And well, so that's cool, right? And that's insightful, and it kind of makes me have compassion for my inner wounded child. And, and we could all step back and talk about the wounds that we experienced in our childhood and how it led to particular cravings. And later on, I wound up doing a research study with 40,000 people to try to document that. And I really, really thought that was going to be the solution. I really, really thought that, okay, so if I'm feeling unloved, what I really need is to figure out, how do I get more hugs when I'm craving chocolate? How do I connect more with my wife? How do I discover more love in my life? And how do I do that with my patients if they're having the problem? But here's what I found. I found that there was this little voice in my head that said, Glenn, that's true. You really weren't loved in the way that you needed to be loved when you were little. No fault of your mom or whatever, anything, but that happened and you're a little traumatized by it. And therefore, until you figure out how to get that love in your life, we can just keep binging. Yippee, let's keep at it. And that was a pivotal insight for me because what it said to me was that it wasn't figuring out the reasons that was going to fix things. It wasn't the soulful insight that was really going to fix things. I mean, the soulful insights could improve my life, and they were worth, food problems were a good jumping off point for, figuring out what ailed me psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this crazy little voice in my head that said, let's do it. Let's just do it. And I remember another time when, 18th Monday in a row that I said I was going to start this new diet. It was going to have a lot of vegetables in it. And I was standing in front of the counter at Starbucks and ready to pay for my coffee. And there was a big hairy chocolate bar on the counter. And the closer it got, the more it was calling my name. And finally, I get to the front of the line, and I hear this little voice in the back of my head saying, Glenn, chocolate grows from a cocoa bean, and a cocoa bean. You know where this is going, right?
Chocolate's a vegetable.
Chocolate is a vegetable. Right. And like we can laugh about that, and everybody probably delights in that kind of experience because they've had the chocolate as a vegetable moment themselves. But it's that voice. It's that crazy voice inside that will rationalize everything on a moment's notice that derails our best plans again and again and again. And, I can tell you where I then researched and found out a little bit more about that voice, or I can tell you a little bit more about how to manage that voice.
Let's do the first one first and then the second one, because that voice that voice can lead to binge eating, but I think that there are people who that voice leads to gambling, or that voice leads to just like spending money on credit when we don't have it, and overextending ourselves, or that's that instant gratification voice, and I think most of us have it. Unfortunately, I don't. I look at people who, like, for example, people from the military who have this amazing discipline. And I think to myself, like, gosh, like there's just areas of their life they're so disciplined, and I look around and I don't see that in the norm. I see people being very spontaneous and making life decisions that are going to harm them in the long run, but in the short run give them immediate pleasure. So this voice?
That's the voice. It's really the voice of the midbrain. It's a survival drive gone wrong. It's a part of us that evolved very early, millions and millions of years ago, when we really didn't have anatomical structures which made it possible to love, which made it possible to gather in tribes, which made it possible to delay gratification and think of our longer term goals and aspirations and solutions. Really, it's this lower part of our brain that says, when it sees something, it says, can I eat it? Should I kill it? Or should I mate with it? And it's the lower brain. I mean, that's the first part of, a neurologist will correct me. I'm sure that I'm doing horrible injustice to the actual anatomy of the brain, but basically that's what it is. Eat it, kill it, or mate with it. And when that lower brain gets fired up, the rest of you kind of disappears for a little while. And so this will be important when I kind of circle back, or remember to circle back to that, because this is a good part of the physiological reason why nurturing your wounded inner child doesn't really work. Well, I'll just say it now. The problem is, at the moment of impulse, the lower brain is taking over. And if we don't find a way to nurture some sense of disgust and separation from that lower brain, then, and especially if we give it attention and try to love it, we're actually reinforcing the problem. Mm-hmm. And so you need a solution that immediately separates you from it and kind of gives you a jolt. Mm-hmm. And so here's where I found that. Simultaneous with the research that I was doing on personality and food addictions, I was also I'd gone to Overeaters Anonymous for a long time, and that really wasn't working. As a matter of fact, I think it made it worse for me. I know the science on it says that it really is not very effective. But the the alternative literature on addiction led me to a guy named Jack Trimpey at Rational Recovery, and he'd actually codified the implementation of the separation from that voice in the black and white addictions. I think he's written a little bit about. I know he's written about food addiction also, but really, in my opinion, he's effective, extremely effective, with the black and white addictions like drugs or alcohol or things that you can give up entirely. This technique didn't work 100% for food because food is something that you like to say in a way you have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block a couple of times a day. Right?
Right. We can't just stop eating.
And there's a complexity of decisions that you need to make every day in order to draw that line. So, for Jack Trimpey's approach, you could say, I'm never going to drink again. And then any little voice that you heard that that suggested you should override that rule, it's really clear that was that. He's got another word for it, and he trademarks it, so I don't use it. But that was that lower brain that was driving you to the addiction. But he really had the idea of separating from that voice with a disgust. And I would really hire anybody who's struggling with the drugs or alcohol. I would really encourage them to head over to his site and go through his materials. He puts out a lot of free materials. But I started to experiment with his technique with food, and I created a method for developing your own food plan, not necessarily following another diet guru's food plan, but really developing your own food plan, kind of categorizing your rules into nevers and always and conditionals and unrestricteds. And this is really what worked for me. So for example, I said, I will never eat chocolate again. I'm just not a guy who should eat chocolate. I'm not saying that other people shouldn't eat chocolate, but I really shouldn't. And if I will never eat chocolate again, then any voice inside my head that says I'm going to eat chocolate, I'm going to call that the pig. And other people call it their inner slacker. Some people call it the BITCH. I'm going to call that my pig. And I'm going to call the chocolate pig slop. And I don't eat pig slop, and I don't listen to farm animals who tell me what to do. And anytime I have a craving, I'm going to say, that's not me who has the craving, that's my pig who has the craving. And actually, I know that this sounds horribly crass and unsophisticated for a psychologist of my level of accomplishment and, in personally and in business, blah, 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 blah. But that's what worked for me.
No, it's brilliant. It's not crass at all. It's absolutely brilliant. You're creating the away from. At first, people thought that voice was them, and you're taking that voice and going, "This isn't you. This is something else," and you're creating that separation. And then we can then identify the voice that's the problem. Because
Exactly.
there's 1,000 voices in our head. I mean, it's all us. It's all like we all think it's us. It's our inner dialogue, and most of the time, people don't slow down enough to recognize we have inner dialogue, but we are constantly chattering. Our brain, try to shut your brain off for 3 seconds. There's going to be or meditation. You sit there. Am I meditating? This floor is cold. Am I supposed to be sitting this way? Am I supposed to be breathing? And it's just like, and then you get it. Oh my gosh, this inner dialogue just won't shut up. And we're constantly judging. We're constantly, assessing. We're constantly thinking about overeaters or emotional eaters, we're thinking about the next meal, the next 10 meals. Addicts are thinking about the next time they're going to get that. And, oftentimes people just space out and think about their grocery list, but we always have a chatter. And how do we distinguish the chatter that's self-destructive from the chatter that is, good? I mean, how many times a day do we have a positive thought that reinforces our positive behaviors, our positive views about ourselves, and that help us to, feel confident and loved, versus all the voices that tear us down? And it's our, self-destructive inner dialogue. How do we distinguish that and then go, I'm going to give more attention to the positive thoughts and less attention to the self-destructive thoughts?
And you distinguish that by getting really, really clear about what the positive thought is and what the self-destructive is. And this is the difference between rules and guidelines. And people are going to have a lot of objections when they first hear me talk about this, because in our culture, it's almost heresy to say that you're never going to do something again. And we can talk about what those objections are. But when I first learned how to do research in psychology, we had to measure a lot of squishy concepts like intimacy, like mother-child bond, like loving contact. And we couldn't just say to an observer, how much intimacy is this couple demonstrating? We had to really work on the definitions and develop scales until the point that you could have 10 people watching this couple and they would more or less agree, like maybe 75, 80% they would agree on whether or not this couple was demonstrating intimacy or not. When it comes to food, I encourage people to develop rules which would allow 10 people to 100% agree on whether or not you were on or off the program, whether or not you step over the line. And when you get to that level, you will have that ability to distinguish your constructive self from destructive self. So for example, I will only ever eat chocolate again on Saturdays. That's a very clear rule. If you followed me around all week and 10 other people followed me around all week, at the end of the week, we'd say, did this guy do it or not? And you'd probably 100% agree, right? As long as I didn't get to sneak anything. If I say, I avoid chocolate 90% of the time. Now, for some people, a guideline like that really works, but it's not going to give you the clarity of distinction that you were just talking about, actually, because if you don't eat chocolate for 5 or 6 days and then you spend a whole day and that's all you do eating chocolate, is that on your plan or is that off your plan? That's off. Yeah, right. What does 90% of the time mean? Does that start on, is it so? And what I like to say is that ambiguity is the pig's best friend. And what you want to do is set up a set of rules that are very practical and precise. And then you're going to have all kinds of feelings about those rules. Immediately, you're going to feel this anxiety. Oh, that's not possible. That's ridiculous. You can't possibly think you would do that. And I would challenge you all to consider that anxiety is coming from the pig. I'm going to pause for a second just in case you want to take this in a different direction, but we could certainly talk about the common objections that people have to. No, I think that's really, really a good thing to talk about, because I know, like, I've read over 30 diet books, and every time I get on I commit these are the new rules. Like I read like the Zone book, and all of a sudden I'm like a whole new world of rules, for example, right? And then I've experienced that anxiety right there. And then it's like all these self-doubt thoughts come in, and all these like, I don't know if I can do this. I can't do this. Or, it's, how long am I going to stick to it this time? You only lasted 2 weeks last time, and so then there's no positive emotions, right? Whereas like at the beginning of a diet, people feel hope and excitement and all these positive emotions, so that kind of drives them forward. Like or maybe they feel like really, really like they get to the point where it's like, no more, I've hit rock bottom, I don't fit into my jeans anymore. But then there's some kind of hope, so some kind of positive emotion that helps them to move forward. And then when they get stuck with the anxiety and all these negative thoughts, which is the pig, and we didn't know that. That becomes like this wall, right? And it's like, how many times do people give up before they even start because of that? There's a goal-driven inspiration and enthusiasm at the beginning of a diet. And that's real. That comes from you. That comes from your higher brain, the part of you that contains all your aspirations and relationships and desires for who you want to be in the world. And you really need to honor that. That's very, very important. What happens in our society is that there are 2 or 3 forces that are really working against us when it comes to food that have really infiltrated our culture and made us all believe that we have to live with this extraordinary level of doubt and uncertainty. So let me just give you an analogy of how you might talk to a little child, and then kind of compare and contrast that to how we talk to ourselves about starting off on a diet or setting off to work with a new rule. Okay, so it's not uncommon to hear that you can't never do anything again. You really can't set up a rule. The best you can hope to do is kind of one day at a time, right? That's common to hear. And the other thing that's common to hear is you should strive for progress and not perfection, because you're never really going to be perfect and you're going to screw up eventually. And so let's not beat ourselves up about it. Now, let's compare that to the psychology of winners, and let's compare it to how we would teach our child to be a winner. So suppose you have a little girl, maybe she's 5 years old, and she wants to ride her bike to the top of a hill without stopping. And she says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, I really want to do this." Well, would you say, "Don't even bother trying. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that goal. You do the best you can," or would you say, "Let's paint a vision in your head of what the top of the hill looks like. What's it going to feel like on top of the hill? What are you going to see? What do you think the next hill is going to look like? Can you really see yourself be there? I want you to hold that vision in your head and pedal as hard as you can, and you're definitely going to make it." And we're going to purge all of the doubt and uncertainty from that little girl's mind, so she can pedal up the hill as hard as she can. Now, if she happens not to make it, we're not going to beat her up and make her feel guilty. We're not going to say you shouldn't have tried in the first place. We're just going to analyze what went wrong, figure out, did she need to eat a little more? Maybe it was too big a goal to start with. Maybe we should have aimed for half the hill, whatever it is. But then we're going to get a vision of the goal again, and we're going to set out purging all possibility of doubt and uncertainty from our minds. And that's the psychology of winners. But in our culture, we've got an incredible economic incentive for the food industry that I used to do a lot of consulting for, by the way, and I'm a little ashamed that I did now. But an incredible economic incentive to put the maximum amount of calories and flavor in the smallest space, sometimes to remove the nutrients because the nutrients interfere with the level of satisfaction and taste. And then there are millions and millions of dollars of research that go into optimizing the taste and addictiveness of those foods, and then optimizing the packaging so that they're perceived to be healthy, figuring out what verbiage we can put on the foods to kind of distract and confuse people. So they're, for example, the classic one is that fat-free doesn't really mean healthy. It's something that's fat-free because it'll have all kinds of carcinogens in it, or a ridiculous amount of calories, or still cause diabetes. But we know that consumers, all they really want is a justification. And the moment you put fat-free on there, not so much anymore, but in the past, now there are other distractions. But we have the food industry using their billions of dollars to do that, and then there's something like 5,000 to 7,000 advertising messages about food aimed at children from the time that they were little, and I don't think any of them are about fruit and vegetables. And then you have the addiction treatment industry that says, well, you really can't quit. You can just abstain one day at a time. I mean, how do we stand a fighting chance? Right? Mm-hmm. You have all this delicious food that pushes our evolutionary buttons, engineered with billions of dollars going into advertising and programming us to think about this in a moment's notice, and then an addiction treatment industry that says you can't resist. Is it any wonder that we're all obese? And so that's why. And I tell that whole story with passion because I want people to really understand there are very strong forces you're up against here, and you need a kind of jarring technique to give you a jolt at that moment of impulse, so you remember what the goals are, and you can kind of step aside from all of those forces. So that's why we want to have ultra clear rules. That's why it's okay to say never. It's important to know it's also okay to say always. And it's okay to install conditional rules. You can say, I only have pretzels at Major League Baseball games, or it doesn't, there's nothing that says that your rules have to be super strict and you're the one who gets to make them. They just have to be really clear. And the goal, it's kind of like being a city traffic planner. You want to put in stop signs and traffic lights and yield signs at all the dangerous intersections, but you don't want to put in one stop sign or one traffic light more than you need, because you don't want to slow down the flow of traffic. You're trying to maximize freedom at the same time as you're trying to maximize control. And that's really the goal here. And there's kind of an art to figuring out what that set of rules will be for you. But it's not about beating yourself up after you make a mistake. It's about having clarity and being willing to perfectly commit, while simultaneously understanding that, maybe you're not going to do it perfectly. Maybe you will make a mistake, but you push that out of your mind while you drive towards that goal, so you can capture the enthusiasm and excitement and inspiration that Ashley was talking about before.
I love it. And so this middle lower brain, the pig, what are some ways that we can begin to distinguish the pig from who we are, from our upper brain, our evolved self?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I tell most people, especially in a podcast when I'm not talking to them, is that rather than trying to develop an entire food plan, try to identify your single most difficult trigger food or behavior. For some people, that'll be while they're watching TV. For other people, like me, it'll be chocolate. For other people, it'll be pizza. For some people, it will be things like if they start the day with 2 big glasses of water, the rest of their day always goes well. So they need a rule that's, I will always start the day with 2 big glasses of water, or something like that. So try to identify one thing and come up with a crystal clear line in the sand that 10 people following you around could identify whether you are on this side or that side of it. And then once you have that rule, commit to it and notice all of the feelings, and you commit to it by saying, I will never eat chocolate again, or I will always have 2 big glasses of water when I get up every day for the rest of my life. And you can change these things later on with like careful intellectual reflection and a little bit of time to think about it. You just don't want to change them impulsively because you don't want to let the pig into that opportunity. But set up that one line, and then resolve that anytime you hear any voice inside of you that says you're going to cross that line, that's your pig talking. It's actually your pig squealing. The actual words that it says is pig squeal, and you don't have cravings. The pig does. In my example, chocolate is pig slop, and you don't eat pig slop. Chocolate belongs in a pig's trough, and you eat out of a human plate. And as crass as that sounds, as crazy as it sounds, if you keep on pushing off the cravings and defining it as the pig as opposed to you, what you're really doing is installing an algorithm in your head that will take hold. It'll take hold, and it'll start to apply to all sorts of other things. And you will suddenly feel excited and powerful, and you'll see the possibilities. And then you just have to be willing, if by chance you ever make a mistake, which you don't ever have to do again, but if you do, you have to be willing to get up and do it again, and keep strengthening that muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you just fed your pig. It's okay, just go back to not feeding it.
But at the moment of commitment, where, we'll put it like this, Ashley. Have you ever heard this wedding vow? I can promise I'm about 80% confident that I can be faithful forever. But you know what? There sure are a lot of attractive people out there, and I'm just being honest. You want me to be honest, don't you? Right? That's not a romantic wedding vow. As a matter of fact, if your husband offered that as part of your vows, he probably wouldn't be your husband right now. And so when you when you go to make this commitment and you hear that voice in your head that says you can't make such a solid commitment, what you say to yourself is, well, there are all sorts of commitments that we make on a perfect basis to control our impulses. Why not one more? Why can't I? I would never kick a policeman in the tushy. I would never do that. I would never push an old lady off a cliff. I never rob banks, and I don't even have to think about it, right? Now, I would like to have the money in the bank. Sometimes I'm mad at policemen. I like little old ladies, so I don't really have a reason to push them off. But you know what I'm saying? It's entirely possible to make this level of commitment, and you need to simultaneously be willing to pick yourself up if you do make a mistake. But paradoxically, the mindset is that I will never make that mistake again.
Does this work for not just overeaters, but does this work for emotional eaters? Does this work for people who just have problems dieting, but they don't identify as overeaters or emotional eaters?
Yeah, this is a system to help you control your behavior in any way that you want to help you control your behavior. The only caveat I would say is don't use it for the black and white addiction. Use Jack Trimpery's systems instead. But absolutely, you can focus this on, just there are some people that have very light types of rules, like, I'll never eat after 9:30 again, or I won't eat in front of the TV, or I'm not going to eat between meals again, or something like that. And it just helps them to ratchet down the overeating a little bit without being too strict.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And with regards to the emotions, emotions can be triggers to binge, but not the cause. The cause is the inability to hear the pig squealing and ignore that pig. It's a very important distinction, because it's very tempting when you see the genuine connection between feeling lonely and going to chocolate, or some of the other things we found in the study, by the way, are that people who are feeling very stressed at work go to salty, starchy carbs, and people that are feeling unloved are going to I said that already. So that is a genuine connection, but the way that connection gets translated into overeating is by ignoring the pig's voice, the inability to hear the pig's voice. There's always something the pig said before you went and reached for the chocolate. The inability to recognize and ignore the pig's voice is really what the cause of overeating is. And so work on the emotions all you want to. It'll make you more comfortable. But if you want to stop this quick, then use this very practical technique and learn how to hear the pig's voice.
Amazing. I absolutely love what you're teaching. So how many years have you been teaching this method?
Well, I journaled about it with my own recovery. I suppose that I really got solid on it to the extent that I felt I could offer it to my clients in probably 2011, 2012. I turned it into a book last year when I actually owned part of a publishing company, and my CEO there said, "Glenn, this is absolutely amazing. It's really helping me. Is it okay if we publish this?" And that was the impetus for me to put it all together. And it's honestly been the most meaningful work I've done in my life. Ever since I put the book out, and 10,000 people, not a day, 10,000 people a month are downloading it. And, we're just about to develop a community, and being able to actually help people cut through all of the muck and all the overwhelming forces in society to see their way clear to a very practical way to stop binging, stop overeating. I feel like I want to spend the rest of my life doing this now. So,
Absolutely. You're definitely on the right path, I can tell, especially because you're making such a huge impact in people's lives. Tell us a bit about your website. By the way, Glenn, your website is the best website I've ever seen in my life. If you know, my listeners, if you're not interested in learning his method, go to the website just to see the world's best website. I when I went to the website, I just burst out laughing. It's so clever, and it really does in a funny way give a great example of how we're feeling and what we're going through, but also helping us laugh at the problem so we can begin to feel powerful instead of powerless to handle it. Neverbingeagain.com. Tell us about the Kindle or slash Nook book that my listeners can get for free by going to the website.
Sure. Sure. And actually, let me just say that to really get the impact of the visuals you're talking about, they need to go on a desktop or an iPad.
Okay.
But you should go on your mobile phone so you don't forget, just to download the reader bonuses. What you want to do is go to neverbingeagain.com and click on the big red button to download the reader bonuses. And the reason that's important is that today we're talking very theoretically, and we're talking about my own personal experience. But what you're going to get when you sign up for the free reader bonuses, in addition to the latest version of the free book for the Kindle, the Nook, or if you can't download that, we can send you a PDF. In addition to that, you'll get free food plan starter templates. So no matter what dietary philosophy you follow, whether you're paleo or vegetarian or a calorie counter or et cetera, there's a version to get you started so you can see some example rules and how to work with them. But more importantly, there's a set of recorded coaching sessions. This is all free, so that you can hear how to implement this in practice. I got about 20 people to allow me to work with them and publish it. And it's very different than hearing me talk about it. You can actually hear it in action, and that's what's really going to help you to implement this in your own life. So it's all at neverbingeagain.com. Click on the big red button and download the electronic versions, the Kindle, the Nook, and the PDF. Those are all free. There is a paperback, which costs $10 if you want it, and it's also available on audible.com.
Oh, fantastic. Audible, excellent. Well, I know I'm going to get the Audible version, because when I'm done listening to all the podcasts I follow when we're driving around in the Seattle traffic, we definitely, my husband and I, love listening to educational books. And even though our son's only about almost 18 months old now, I hope in some level he's absorbing all of it while he's listening with us.
I got to tell you, my sister used to listen to Bob Marley and Mozart and Bach when she was pregnant with my nephew. And he wound up playing Carnegie Hall when he was 11 years old.
Wow. Awesome. Well, then my son's going to be an author for sure. The amount of books he listens to on tape. That's hilarious. Oh, fantastic. You are just a wealth of knowledge. It has been phenomenal having you on the show. Before we end today's interview, I'd love for you to share you've already taught our listeners some great tools that they can, walk away with and begin to do in their life. Give our listeners a challenge, something that they can do now and for the next 7 days to see improvement in their health. And health is not just physical, it's emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic. So any of those versions of health.
Well, what I'd like you to do when you find yourself over the next few weeks tempted in a direction that you really know is not in your best interest, I'd like you to remind yourself something that Jim Rohn said, which is that a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. Freedom actually sits on top of discipline. Most people think that life is about that you have to choose either to have a free-willing life or a disciplined life. But the truth is, without discipline, there is no freedom. If a jazz pianist didn't take the time to practice their scales, then they can't improvise in any kind of way that's going to sound good. If your car were not designed by very disciplined engineers, then you couldn't turn the wheel and push the gas or press the brake to get exactly where you want to go. And if our society had no stoplights or yield signs or stop signs, we couldn't move from one place to another freely, feeling safe that we're going to arrive in one piece. It's the same with just about everything in your life. And so when you're feeling tempted and you're feeling like you really wish you could have the freedom, remind yourself that freedom sits on top of discipline, and ask yourself, what discipline do I want to install in my life to make my life better today?
Thank you so much. I love that question. We're all going to definitely ask ourselves that and go to never binge again. And I urge listeners to share this episode with those friends and family they love in their life who may have been struggling with diets or struggling with sticking to the resolve that they commit to. Because I think this is just a phenomenal, fun, fast, and easy way to begin to stop listening to that voice, the pig, that's causing us to do the things we don't ultimately want to do, and get rid of that instant gratification for long-term happiness. Thank you so much, Glenn, for being on the show. I also, Glenn, I'm going to invite you. I invite all my guests to join our Facebook group. We started a Facebook group about, I guess, a few weeks ago, just recently. For all the listeners to join, you can go to learntruehealth.com/group, or you can just search Learn True Health in Facebook. And I invite all the guests as well to join our Facebook group so that they can promote themselves, share their website, answer any questions. And once the podcast is over and a guest absolutely loved that, or the listener absolutely loved that guest, then the listeners can make sure they connect with that guest and follow them. So yeah, you can definitely join us, Glenn, and listeners, please join us as well.
Ashley, I would love to do that. Can you tell me where to do that again?
Yes, absolutely. It is, if you go to learntruehealth.com/group, or you just search, like, and there's spaces in between the words, Learn True Health in Facebook, and you'll find our group. And yeah, we're building a community for the listeners and for the guests so that they can connect with each other, and so the guests can keep, sharing and promoting what they do with the listeners.
I will definitely do that, and I just want to say I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions about this episode in that group.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn. It's been wonderful having you on the show, and I'd love to have you back in the future when you publish more books, when you start your community. If you have any announcements, any new developments in your program, I'd love to have you back on the show to continue.
I'd love to do it.
Fantastic, because I really believe in what you're doing, and I'm happy to help get the word out.
Thank you, dear.
Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.